Welcome, people, to another episode of IDTALK for Educators Live, the show for the unsung heroes of education. I'm your host, Sarfo-Mensah. And if this is your first time tuning into the podcast, I welcome you and I hope that today's episode is one that will allow you to come back for more content. And if you're a returning listener or viewer of the podcast, as always, I welcome you back. And I hope that today's episode is one that you find informative, enlightening, and as always, insightful. So before we get into the main event, just a reminder for folks who are on YouTube, please make sure you hit that red subscribe button so you can get future notifications on new episodes of the podcast. If you're also listening from Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you listen to your podcast, make sure you subscribe there as well. Also, Identity Talk can now be found on Patreon. So for my faithful listeners and viewers who would like to continue to help build this platform and bring on phenomenal guests, such as the one that we have today, please become a patron today at patreon.com/Kwame Sarfo-Mensah. That information will be found in the episode notes. And once you get on Patreon, you'll be able to have access to exclusive content that you will not find anywhere else but on that page. And then finally, to catch up on past and future episodes of the podcast, you can go to our main website at IDTALK4ED.com. Thank you all for continuing to support. And then one other thing. So as you all know, I got a new book coming out called Learning to Relearn, Supporting Identity in a Culturally Affirming Classroom. This book was 3 years in the making, and I'm thankful for all the support that I was able to receive during that journey, which I am happy to share in the coming months as we get closer and closer to the release date. But to learn more about the book, which is my baby, my greatest piece of work, which was not possible without the spirit of community, you can go to the main website for the book at learningtorelearn.com. You'll be able to get an overview of the chapters that are in the book and just more information about how this book came to be. And then to pre-order your copy, you can go to Amazon right now. Paperback version is available at this time. Closer to the release date, the ebook will be available. But you can go ahead right now, Amazon.com, pre-order your copy today, spread the word to your educator friends, and let's build together. Thank you all. All right, people. So this podcast is going on 160 plus episodes. And during that span, I've had the honor of interviewing close to 175 different educators in almost 5 years. And what I've come to realize about this podcast is that the educator circle, especially when we talk about identity affirming education, culturally responsive teaching, and all these other principles that I am so passionate about, that circle of educators is a very small circle. And then you start to realize that there are 6 degrees of separation between the different guests that I have on. And today's guest is somebody who I came across as a result of other past guests who I've had a chance to interview, guests I've had a chance to work with on other projects in the past. And I'm just excited to have this phenomenal, dynamic educator come on. She's coming off an incredible month of May where she was able to release a new children's book. She had a whole birthday she celebrated, and she just got a master's degree from Columbia Teachers College, which we love because so many dope Black educators who have had a chance to interview on this podcast have just come through with their brilliance, and she is somebody who's going to add on to that. But without further ado, I want to bring on our guest for today. Let's bring on Miss Arlène Elizabeth Casimir to the podcast to talk about her story, talk about her new book, and all the incredible work she's doing in her communities and beyond. So let's talk to Arlène. Hello.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me. What a beautiful introduction. Thank you.
Yeah, we try on this podcast. This is all about giving educators like yourself their flowers. We do this work so selflessly, and we focus so much on people, young people, elderly people, people who are just in our circle, that we forget to affirm ourselves from time to time because we're so consumed with worrying about others. So this is my opportunity to do that for you.
Thank you.
Yeah. But how are you feeling? I mentioned all the wins. Talk to me.
I am feeling great. I am so just I'm so grateful that this past month felt like a harvest season. And what's interesting about it is it wasn't without challenges, but I just kept myself grounded in this idea of how good can it get and
Mhm.
how much fruit can I harvest? And um, having that perspective really supported me in, reaping the benefits of a lot of seeds that I've planted over the years. And so it felt like a very cumulative month of just lots of things, but I couldn't forget to celebrate despite, you know, things that could potentially distract me from doing so. And I'm just really grateful for perspective.
Yes. Perspective is always key. It's something that my wife and I learned as we've been taking emotional intelligence classes. So
Wow.
often people misunderstand each other because of a lack of perspective
Mhm.
when it comes to people's experiences, whether they're current or past. And I think it's important that we do take time to understand those perspectives as a way to build the empathy.
Yeah.
And that's something that I know you talk about with regard to the importance of trauma responsive pedagogy, which we'll get more and more into down the road. But I want to start the conversation off with a question that I ask everybody. And I know for you, you're someone who's mentioned in the past that the stories that our parents tell to us, they dictate the path that we end up taking. They
Mhm.
define our purpose, right? And you are somebody who does a lot of things outside of being an educator, being a healer, being a herbalist, being a consultant, and wearing all these many hats. I'm just curious to know who or what inspired you to want to become this dynamic educator that you've grown to become, and are still becoming, because
Mhm.
it's evolutionary. We know that.
Yeah, and I think that for one, I would have to start with my first teacher, my dad, my father. I think that he was always willing to be my student. He was a janitor at a school and he brought home a chalkboard when I was really small. I was about 3 or 4 years old. And he would ask, like, what are you going to teach me today? And that was his way of like helping me to learn my letters and my numbers. And he used to call me his little human computer and tell me all kinds of phone numbers that I would then memorize. And I just remember all of the books that he would bring home. And I think that love for education and just the way that um, it cultivated like our relationship, it that was like the first time that I fell in love with like education, if you will. And what's interesting about that is when I entered kindergarten, I had a really terrible experience with my kindergarten teacher that also made me want to be a teacher, if that makes sense. So I got to kindergarten. My parents are from Haiti. So my parents had heavy accents. They learned English alongside me. We spoke Haitian Creole at home. And so when I got to kindergarten, my kindergarten teacher would call me Arlene, and she would insist, like, your name's Arlene, your name's Arlene. And my dad named me Arlène. And so I remember my mother telling me, your teacher is like your second mom, and you need to listen to your teacher at all times. And so I think about um, that charge that my mother gave me, and how that really impacted the way that I saw agency and the ability to advocate for myself in front of a teacher, and how that then impacted me to go by Arlene for many years and say, I'll be called Arlene at home, but I'll be called Arlene in public or in, American spaces. And I just remember thinking, I never want a child to have to do that. I never want a child to have to go by a name that their teacher's comfortable with. And um there's so many different things that were at play, right? Like, this idea of assimilation uh
Hmm.
was very prevalent during those times. This idea of how you treat a teacher, how you engage with a teacher when you're in a foreign country, and just the respect that my family had for educators, all of that shaped this experience. But that experience in and of itself also shaped how I wanted to show up for children as an educator myself.
Wow. So when we see the video of you correcting the announcer at your graduation who mispronounced your name, that self advocacy, you've been about that life for a minute. That wasn't just a recent thing. This is something that was instilled in you from a very young age because of those lessons your father and your mom instilled in you.
Yeah, I mean, I think my mom, she was way more open-minded, and this idea, like, you're more than your name and who cares, let them say whatever they want. But my father never yielded. He said, I
Hmm.
named you Arlene. And no matter how uncomfortable it is for you or for the person, that's what I named you. And so you can choose to embrace that or you can change that. It's up to you. It's your path. But I'm letting you know, like, what I named you, and that I will not yield because we're in a different place. I will continue to call you what I've named you. And so it was really like my choice how I would navigate that. And for a long time, I would just go, I'll be Arlene. I'll be Arlene out there, and I'll be Arlene in here. But I saw how that really impacted my identity and the integration of all of me in all spaces.
Yes. Now let's talk about Haiti. So, for context, my wife and I live in Boston
Mhm.
before we moved abroad. My wife is from Boston, so she grew up with a lot of Haitian friends because there's a huge Haitian population
Yeah.
out there. So we're used to going to friends' house during New Year's, and they got the soup jamour going and the cremas going,
Yes.
which we enjoy. And then we went to a Black Paris tour when we went to France,
Mhm.
and we learned about Jean Baptiste Point du Sable
Mhm.
and how revolutionary he was in Haitian history. Like, so these are just a few things that we just knew from experience being
Right.
around our Haitian family. But not a lot of people are aware of these things that I mentioned. We hear a lot of the negative news
Mhm.
that we see. And this podcast, we value the counter story
Yes.
so much. And I want to give you an opportunity to just share in your own words your description of Haiti as you see it and how the outside world doesn't.
Yeah. I see Haiti with a great deal of reverence. That is my motherland, and I see Haiti as the pearl of the Caribbean. I think about towns like Jacmel, the first city in the Caribbean to have lights, like to have electricity. I think about the railroad system that began to be created in Haiti as the first country in the Caribbean to experience that. I feel like Haiti is a place of a lot of firsts, the first free Black nation in the Western world. And I think Haiti is a place that has a history of significant pride, a history of tremendous beauty, tremendous resilience, tremendous strength. And I think that's what the world doesn't recognize, how powerful and rich the culture, the land, the people of Haiti are. And yeah, that's what I would say to begin.
So, and this is something that you grew up knowing because of the stories that your parents, and more specifically, your father taught you.
Mhm,
And this leads me to a new children's book, Back Home, which is about the stories that your father shared.
mhm,
And what I love about the book is that it's highlighting the relationship between Black father, Black daughters. We
mhm.
don't always see those counter stories with regard to that relationship. So for that to be highlighted, but also to bring in Haitian culture and introducing people to that with the language, with even just the history, the landscape, the beauty, all the things that you just shared, I think is just phenomenal. So I want to talk about Back Home because as somebody who grew up as a first generation Ghanaian American, I knew that I had a direct connection to Ghana because both my parents are from there.
Right,
I knew where I came from.
right,
But there are a lot of Black folks in a diaspora, more specifically in the States, who they don't have that connection. They're
right.
searching for it, whether it's through African ancestry or other DNA testing. So I want to know, with regard to Back Home, how do you believe that helps children and others shape their perspective of what home means to them?
Mhm. I hope that back home helps children to define what home means to them. And I hope that they can listen to the stories that their families share to support them in crafting their own story, the stories that have the highest vision for their lives. And I'm hoping that Back Home is an invitation for people to see that home is within, home is always within you. And you, as in the reader, play a significant role in shaping not only how you see home, but how others see home too, how others see your home. So I'm hoping that children get that perspective, readers get that perspective. And this idea of having a strong, relationship with your father, there it is.
Yep.
And just redefining that narrative, that was very important to me as well. So in this book, it's the little girl and her father, but I'm sure that many children have all kinds of adults who play that role of holding on to history in times of difficulty and able to tell them all of the stories, not just the happy ones, not just the joyful ones, but to know that children can also handle tough stories. Children can understand sorrow. Children can handle the kaleidoscope of humanity, of human emotions. And actually, it's important for them to be able to hear all the stories so that they could determine which ones um, they want to continue to tell, which ones they want to create, and what kind of solution there'll be for the stories that are really complex. So um, that's what I hope for children, that they're able to not only think about the stories that their families tell, however they define family, the stories they want to tell, the relationships that they're building with others, and for them to always be thinking about this concept of back home. Like, what does back home mean to you? You know?
And as I'm looking at the cover, I'm thinking about how important the illustrator is in that process of helping the vision of the book come to life. And you were blessed to have an illustrator who was able to capture your vision for this book. So I'd love for you to just talk to us about your illustrator, Ken Dale, and how he was essential in your process of helping you get that vision out there for back home, because that's something that a lot of people aren't aware of as far as that process of putting a children's book together.
Yeah, absolutely. So I believe in the ability to manifest what's for your highest good and in alignment for you. I
Yes.
live by those universal laws. So when I saw the book Auntie Lucy's Talking Paintings that was illustrated by Ken Dale a couple of years before I submitted my book to my publisher, I said, like, God, universe, ancestors, I want this to be my illustrator, and I put the book down. Like, that was literally what I did. So when you're writing a picture book for a major publishing house like Candlewick, when you're writing with them, you don't get to choose your illustrator. They come to you with illustrators, and you get to like share your input, like, oh, out of these three, I would prefer this one. But when they came to me, Ken Dale was on the list. And it was like this riveting moment of, yes, I manifested that. And so the next step was, you know, thank you, God. Thank you that Ken Dale is doing this. Thank you, ancestors. Thank you, mom. At that time, my mom had just passed away. So I was like, look at you working already, ma'am. Thank you. And so I learned that as an author, you don't get to influence the illustrator. Like, you don't get to tell them how to do their job. Just like they don't tell you how to write the words, you don't get to tell them how to draw the pictures. There is a surrender that's necessary in the process. That if you love this person's work, you trust that they'll handle your story and share it and bring it to life in the most, you know, illustrious ways. And so that's what I had to do. I had to surrender, which is really hard for me as an educator, because if anyone knows what it's like to be a teacher, you have the outcome in mind, you know the objective, you know where you're going, you know how you're going to get everybody there. And so I was not allowed to do that with this book. But what I was allowed to do was share some art notes. So those art notes were, there's different images in the book that I gave an idea, like, I imagine this page being like this. And so those art notes were very helpful. I had to be very lean with them, but I was still able to share them. And Ken did such a phenomenal job. Like, he just took this story and ran with it. And even seeing his first sketches without color, I was in tears, you know? And then finally, when he added the color, I was just blown away. But it was important to allow him to use his own Caribbean background, because his family is from Dominica. It was important for him to be able to use his own Caribbean background to be inspired by the words, and to just allow the images to come to him and to trust that. So when I finally saw the final reveal, like, I was just sobbing because he did the book so much justice.
Oh, that's beautiful. And I think that's important for folks to know, especially when you're choosing an illustrator. I know that was the case for me. I had to find somebody who style that I respected, who had the portfolio, and I really liked the style of the sketches and the drawings and pieces that they were making. But at the same time, if you try to micromanage that process, you take the agency away from the illustrator, and then you end up not getting a product that you're confident in. So I love that you were able to allow for that agency to be had for the illustrator, because
Mhm.
I think that's important, just being able to trust in that process.
Yeah. I had to trust the process and I just had to surrender, like it will be what it will be. And
Yeah.
so that was very enlightening. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So listen, I'm showing y'all the cover, people. Make sure you go ahead and get a copy of Back Home. It is out now and it's already getting some great reviews. As you can see, this is on Amazon, but you can get it at other book retailers as well. So make sure you all go ahead and get that. But you mentioned your mother, and I had a question regarding your mom, who I know passed about 3 years ago.
It'll be 3 years in October.
It'll be
Yeah.
3 years in October.
Mhm.
So I know what's interesting about your mom's passing was that it happened on the same day as your father's birthday.
Yes, you've done your
And
research.
listen, I don't play.
You
Listen,
don't
everybody know I
play.
don't play. When
Wow.
they come, I do the research.
I appreciate that about you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, yeah, it's important. Like you're giving me time. Let me take the time to learn about my guests. So
Yes,
so anyway, October 25th has significant meaning because your mom's passing happens on that day, but it's also your father's birthday.
yes,
So, as someone who talks about the importance of being trauma responsive as an educator, you're now in a situation where you have to process these two big events happening on the same day.
mhm.
So, my question for you is when October 25th comes around, since your mom's passing, what meaning have you been able to make out of the passing? How have you been able to process that, if you don't mind me asking?
Oh, I don't mind at all. See, I see
Yeah.
myself as an alchemist, and I think it's important to transmute, transcend, and transform circumstances. So, since my mother passed away, I think about what she left me with, which was an incredibly strong faith. And she would always say, through good times and quote unquote bad times, she would always say, "This is the day the Lord has made. Let us be glad and rejoice." We rejoice in good times. We rejoice in bad times. We rejoice in sad times. We rejoice in happy times. And so when I think about the first birthday, her passing on my father's birthday, interestingly enough, that was the first thing that I said, let us rejoice. Like she's no longer in pain. We've watched her suffer. Let us rejoice. You'll never forget her. She loved you so much. And you were blessed to have 40 years with her. Let us rejoice. So, really, it's not toxic positivity in the sense that I'm dismissing my pain. Like, yes, it was very difficult to have lost my mother, and I still grieve my mother. Grief is not a linear process. Like, I get up sometimes and I want to call her and I'll listen to her voice notes, and things of that nature because she's now the presence that's never an absence. She's now in the spirit realm. And so I recognize that and I have leveraged that day to celebrate her as well as to celebrate my father. So to say that what's beautiful is that I'm still alive and he's still alive and we have gone on a vacation for 1 year. I threw him a birthday party for his 70th birthday last year. So it's always like, how are we going to celebrate? How are we going to celebrate that we are alive? How are we going to celebrate that we made it through another 365 days without her in her physical body? How are we going to celebrate the ways that we still feel connected to her presence? And how will those celebrations be our healing practice, essentially, from the pain that we may experience in this physical loss?
So this season, Identity Talk for Educators Live will be including ad spots for businesses, products, and events that are adding significant value to their communities. And here's the catch: you don't have to be an educator or an education-based business to be a part of this. We're looking for people who are just doing great work in the community, and we want to use our platform as a way to amplify their work. So if you are an entrepreneur or you know of an entrepreneur who is doing just that, bring them in our direction. Have them reach out to us. If they want to learn more about their ad spots and how they can get themselves promoted on this platform, they can contact myself, Kwame, at Kwame at identitytalk4educators.com. I'll say it one more time. It is Kwame at identitytalk4educators.com. Hope to hear from you, and let's keep on amplifying our work and building each other up. And in saying that, how does your mother's spirit manifest in the work that you do through Lakai Loon? Because I know that Loon being your nickname from your mother, and then Lakai just focus on home,
Yeah,
whatever your center is, right? Because we
that's
all
right.
have different centers. I'm curious to know how that drives the work that you do through that venture, where you're focused on the healing and the wellness, which is so essential now, given everything that's going on around us.
Yeah, thank you so much for bringing that up because my mother was the kind of person who I would say my father was my first like logistical teacher, like my logical brain teacher, like know your letters, know your numbers, read your books. But my mother was definitely my first spiritual teacher. And what I mean by that is she had an incredibly challenging life, but her ability to transmute things and to really turn the venom of her disadvantages into like the nectar of the life that she was able to create for herself was so inspiring to me. And so I think about home. Everyone always came to my mother's home. The house was always filled, and she was always someone who listened to people. But the way that my mother would practice healing would be through cooking. So she would always prepare food. I'm talking breakfast, lunch, and dinner for everyone. And this was a woman who worked 18-hour shifts as a nurse, you know? So to see her still hold space for people and still find time to listen and to break bread and to support others, she was the embodiment of back home. Like my dad was the voice, the mind, but I always felt that she was the heart. And she embodied the lessons and showed that to me. And so when I think about Lakai Loon and the ways that I could honor my mother, my heritage, my inner child, it's like, how can I show up for myself at home and share that with others? And what is my medicine? And it just so happens that, you know, my medicine is the trauma responsiveness, but it's also the herbalism. It's also the energy work that I do, the spiritual work that I do. And so um, my mother is deeply tied to that. I feel like even operating as Loon is paying homage to her legacy and to who she showed up as. And she didn't always explain, this is what this means, this is what that means. But as I look back, I'm able to see this is how she was laying the groundwork. This is what she was teaching me. Interestingly enough, the herbalism aspect comes from my grandmother and my father's side. My mother grew up in the city of Port-au-Prince, Haiti, and my dad grew up in rural Haiti in a place called El Savo on the countryside. So we have a long line of healers, people who worked with the land to support others through herbs, people who knew plants and medicine and things of that nature. So I really, um, I'm the combination of the two of them, right? So that's what Lakai Loon is about. It's about how do I bring together my mother's side and my father's side to be all of who I was born to be. And it's a constant act of becoming. It's a constant um, set it's a constant decision making process. Like, this is how I'm going to be, this is how I will intentionally show up. And it's in honor of my current life, my ancestors, and my absolute faith in the descendants that I'll have.
So as you're talking about this, now I'm starting to understand the two ventures. So we just talked about Lakai Loon, which is all your mom's influence there. And then Ravai sounds more like your
Rev-
father's influence because you're dealing with the logical, you're dealing with the educational aspect. So I feel like the merging of the two is what allows you to awaken the consciousness. So I see the intersection and how they come together.
yeah,
That's beautiful.
Yeah, thank you so much for just even highlighting that. I don't think I ever thought about it that way. And so this is like a gift, and hearing you like make sense of it that way, because I went by the awakened teacher for many years, and I always would say that I have this awakening collaborative, and in this collaborative my job would be to help raise consciousness in others and in myself. And it wasn't until I was like really going through the documentation and the incorporation of my business that my lawyer was just like, that name isn't going to work. Too many people are using it, this, that, and the third. And I sat down and I got real quiet and I meditated about it and I prayed about it. And then I just said, Reveille. What about Reveille? And she said to me, what does that mean? And I said, it means awaken in Creole, in Haitian Creole. So let's try that. I don't think anyone has that. And she said, like, Reveille, like the eye drops, like what? And I was like, no, Reveille, Reveille, to awaken in Haitian Creole. And, you know, when I finally decided that that would be the name of the business, that would be the name of the, you know, educational venture and how we would proceed, it just felt so aligned to all that I hope Reveille becomes for me, for my family, for Haiti, you know. And so it just was so aligned, but it was not planned at all.
So, being the awakened teacher, now I'm curious about your time being a classroom teacher. Were there certain moments that you had during those years that prompted you to do what you're doing right now, as far as
Absolutely.
starting Revive and La Loom?
Absolutely. Everything. Everything had to do with it. And I think the most poignant moments were moving to teach the first children to come to school post Hurricane Katrina. And my
Mm.
dad was really supportive, like, yes, go back to Louisiana and, you know, do this incredible work. But my mother was so confused. She was just like, you know, we worked really hard for you not to ever have to deal with anything like that. And we just came out of this earthquake in Haiti. Like, we are very familiar with natural disasters, with hurricanes, with earthquakes. Like, we are trying to have a peaceful, stable life over here. And I just can't understand why you would want to go back into that, given how people are being treated, um, you know, in New Orleans right now. I mean, the people of New Orleans, it was like a third world country, the lack of support and assistance that was given. And I just remember saying, this feels like it's a part of my assignment. Like, it feels
Mm.
like what I have to do, and I can't explain it. I just know that I belong there and I need to go there. And so I went, and interestingly enough, it that's where trauma responsive pedagogy was born. That's where La Loon was born. Like, I remember my friend being in my kitchen in my Creole cottage in New Orleans and saying to me, like, you know, you could sell these teas. You know, you could sell these baths. Like, you know that, like, what did you put in this? You know, I just felt some healing after this. And I was just like, well,
Mhm.
I didn't think about that. And so I kept wanting to have an incubator space, a haven, so to speak, for myself and other teacher friends to process our trauma, to process the vicarious trauma that we saw students experiencing, that we witnessed them experiencing. So, like, every Wednesday evening, my colleagues would come over and we would cook together and we would talk about how we want to support certain kids and families and how we need to be supported in our own lives and different things that we were learning and doing. And so, um, that notion of having an awakening collaborative and thinking about the consciousness that was being raised by us having this very challenging experience and the different types of healing modalities that we shared to cope constructively with what we were experiencing, that was all a part of my journey and my story. And it wouldn't have been, maybe it would have been possible, but I can't imagine like how it would have turned out had I not gone to New Orleans.
Mm.
So that played a huge role um, in who I became because of what I felt like I had to do off stage to heal. And that was also a place where a lot of my own childhood trauma and things came up for reckoning. Like, oh, you want to support students in a healing centered way? You want to be trauma informed and trauma responsive? Start with yourself. And so that was the work of
And speaking of trauma, how has your relationship with trauma changed in recent years, given some of the events that have happened personally in your life?
Yeah, I felt like when I was I felt like when I was writing the book Trauma Responsive Pedagogy, there was this prank or joke, so to speak, like, you go first, like trauma responsive pedagogy, you are about to experience a global pandemic, lots of trauma all around the world. You are going to experience a separation and a divorce, and your mother's going to die. And you're also going to start your businesses and leave your job. And I was just like, okay, wow, trauma informed. And so the notion of being responsive came from recognizing that trauma is an invitation to heal. That when we experience trauma, it's a profound gateway for healing. And there's a level of accountability and responsibility that comes with that, and a recognition that I am not a victim. And this situation can really be used as an opportunity to become a better version of myself. If I know how to cope, if I know how to seek support, if I know how to be with it, to feel it, to heal it, right? And so my relationship over the years with trauma has evolved from just being aware that this is a world where there's significant trauma and what it looks like and how it manifests with others, to a transition to, okay, and what are you going to do about it? And what are you going to do with it? And that has been the biggest shift for me over the years. Like, it's one thing to know about something, it's another thing to take responsibility and do something about it.
Yeah, which is real. Wow.
Yeah. And so for me, like, my relationship with trauma has evolved from, like, let's look back, like in that very Freudian way, like, what happened with your mama? What happened with your daddy? What happened with your family? What happened in your history? To, like, let's look forward. What story do you want your descendants to tell about you?
Come on.
Let's look forward. You look back enough. You can't fix nothing doing that. But what you can do is say, I would like for my grandchildren and my great grandchildren and my great great grandchildren to talk about me the way they talk about Dessalines. So guess what? You got a whole lot of work to do. And I don't think he was throwing himself a pity party. I also don't think it was toxic positivity. Was some accountability. There was this notion that we're going to be free. Let's go. And
Yes.
that was for us, meaning, the descendants. So that's really the place that I enter it now. There's this, like, it's one thing to know, it's another thing to do something about it. And it's an even further thing to say, I dare to heal it, so that I dare to believe, like, in a world with significant climate crisis, I dare to believe that my future will inherit a better world because of the actions that I've taken.
Ooh, man, I cannot wait to listen to this playback when I'm editing this. Oh my goodness. So much good stuff. All right. Got a few more questions. This is not a question that I gave you. This is just something that popped up. And it
Okay.
goes back to what I said in the beginning of the podcast about the 6 degrees of separation, how I come across different educators who know this educator and that educator that I know, and it's like, wow, we're just so alike. So I want to talk about 2 ladies who I know fairly well, who are huge inspirations, huge mentors, personal friends of yours. So I want to talk about Dr. Yolanda Silly Ruiz, who's like my heart,
Yes.
and then Dr. Sonia Sherry Paul. Like those 2.
Okay, let's talk about
The
them.
work that they've done is just phenomenal. I want
Yes.
to start with Dr. Yolanda Silly Ruiz, who happens to be the forward writer of my book coming out.
I saw that
And
and I thought,
she's also been on the podcast. Matter of fact, It was after I did my recording with her that I asked the question if she would do me the honor of writing the foreword for the book. And we barely knew each other at this time. The concept I had for my book was not even formed 100%. I just
Mhm,
had like an idea. And
mhm.
without hesitation, she said, "Yes, brother, I'll do it." Her just,
Yes. Her loving voice.
yeah, like the way that she was able to just manifest and the way she pours into people.
Mhm.
Every person needs a friend like Dr. Yolanda Celia Ruiz in your life.
Yeah,
That's all I can say. Like just how empathetic she is and just how supportive she is. Like
yeah,
I could go months without talking to her. The minute we start to talk again, and it's like we don't miss a beat. She's
don't
asking questions like, "How you feeling? How your family doing?" And those are the kind of people that you need in order to heal, in order to be well.
yes.
So talk to me about how she's impacted you personally and professionally, either or.
Oh, you can make me cry. I love Yolanda. She is love incarnate. She is a phenomenal soul. I did a book review of her book, Peace Chronicles, The Peace Chronicles, and I have to tell you, like, I was just like, she's a warrior goddess. Like, hello, don't you see who this person is? I think what I love about that book, um, ooh, it's the Peace Chronicles, it's Love from the Vortex. I think about her poetry personally, and when I was healing and going through a significant breakup from a 10-year marriage, I read those books and they were such a healing balm to my soul. And I thought, this beautiful woman understands, she overstands, she understands, and
Mm,
she is like sharing her heart on these pages, and it's helping me. Like, this literature is supporting me through this journey. And so I think about that and just how much of a complete human she is in all that she's been through, just like as an academic, a scholar, as a poet, as a teacher, as a lecturer, as a mother, as a sister. Like, she is just wholesome, and she's able to deal with the rich complexity of life and still show up in the most loving ways. Professionally, she has been one of my biggest supporters and advocates, and someone who just really believes in my work and what I'm doing, and
yeah.
really supported my ideas and my studies. And I have so much love and respect for her, for how she shows up, for how she loves on everyone, but especially how she loves on Black people. Because I love Black people who love Black people.
Yes.
And you can
Yeah.
tell who loves us. And I think it's easy to fall into the trap of not loving us fully when you get into certain positions, and she doesn't allow that to happen in her heart. Like, she holds space for people to love, for people to heal, and for people to show up fully and completely in their God-given purpose.
Mm.
She's so understanding and so loving. Yeah, I'm so grateful for her.
All right. So then there's her, and then there's Dr. Sonia Cherry Paul. Just
Yeah,
talk to the audience about her.
yes,
Mm.
Dr. Sonia Sherry Paul is really such a fierce I feel like she talks about this metaphor, like, be a dandelion, abundant, resilient, strong, in her new book, Anti-Racist Reading Revolution. And
Yeah.
she is the most fierce dandelion I know. Sonia is not afraid to speak truth to power. She is also so loving. She shows up for her people. She shows up, and in a way that she is so well researched, well informed. She shows up knowing what she's talking about, and she has all the receipts to back it up. And I really appreciate and respect that about her. I love the way that our relationship has evolved over the years. So we worked together at Teachers College, and we would do all of the social justice work. Like, we were the two people that did that work. And it was just so powerful to collaborate with her and to work with her in that capacity. But personally, she has just shown up in such powerful and nurturing and loving ways as like a sister and a friend. And seeing that part of her, like seeing the part of her that, as Toni Morrison says, like, the part of the person that gathers you, but also the part of the person that shows up for you and shows how they do that by showing up for themselves. Like, that's who Sonia is. She is just a beautiful human being, and she's really about love as well. Like,
Yes.
she's really about love. And when you get to know just how Sonia's love is really about accountability.
Mm.
And I think that's where like a misconception could be um held about like what that love is to her, and I really appreciate that about her, that her love is about accountability. She's gonna hold you accountable, herself accountable, your friend accountable. She's gonna hold everybody accountable. But it will be in the spirit of love and in the spirit of liberation.
All these are facts. And just to give a quick story about Sonia, I have never met her in person. She's never been on this podcast. My connection with her has been through DMs and emails. But this is how I know she's loved, because when I was going through my own process writing my book, I was with one publisher, and then I ended up having to transfer to another publisher. And when I was going through that transition, she was somebody who I reached out to get some advice on how I should proceed with this journey. And she gave me some gems, and she said, listen, whatever you need, you got my support. And then you fast forward a couple years later with the book now in production. I reached out to her to see if she'll be willing to write a review of the book. And she did that. Like, she did that for me. And this is a woman who I've never met in person before, barely knew each other, but she thought enough about me to say, you know what, this brother's got something. I may not know him, but I know him.
That's
Like, I
right.
know his heart. And because I know his heart, I'm going to support him and advocate for him in the best way that I can. And that's what she did for me. And I know she's going to listen to this podcast. So if she is listening, Dr. Sonia Cherry Paul, you got to come on to the podcast. We got to have the conversation. It's long overdue. But back to you. I want to go ahead and finish off with this question that I ask everybody. How does Arlène Elizabeth Casimir stay true to the teacher in her?
Mhm. I stay true to the teacher in me by always listening to my intuition, my inner teacher. And that I always say, like, your intuition is your best teacher. This notion of cultivating insight, of cultivating enlightenment, it's the ability to trust one's own inner guidance system in a world where things are always trending and changing. And sometimes social justice is trendy, sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's cool to be trauma informed, and sometimes it's not. And it's like, as opposed to worrying about any of those things, like what's happening externally, I pay attention to what's happening in my inner world and how that's manifesting outwardly. So when people are like, you're so blessed, I'm like, well, I knew that inside first. And you're just seeing the outward manifestation of it. And so for me, it's important for me to stay true to myself as an educator by always ensuring that I hear, listen, and heed to my own inner voice, my own inner teacher. And I'm always willing to remember who I really am. and rise into who I need to be as an educator.
There it is, y'all. Arlène, thank you so much for taking time to talk with me today. We could have gone another hour, probably two, probably three, but I am thankful for the hour that you've granted me to share your story. And I want to give you a chance before you go to just let people know how they can connect with you either on social media or on any of the websites. So, Ravai, Lakailun. So let them know how they can connect with you and your work.
Oh, thank you so much. I loved being on here with you, Kwame, and I wish you an abundance of success in your work. May you be blessed, prosperous, in all that you do. Um, Everyone, you can find me on Instagram at the Awakened Teacher. It's the .awaken.teacher. I You can find me on reve.io, so www.reve.io. And yeah, you can look me up, Arlène Elizabeth Casimir, and that can also give you ideas of how to connect with me. www.lakailum.com is my healing and wellness venture. So there are many ways to connect, and I look forward to hearing from anyone who watches.
And then one more thing, get your copy of Back Home today.
Yeah.
Go to Amazon, go to Candlewick, right?
Yes. Candlewick, Barnes and Nobles, wherever books
Barnes
are
and
sold.
Nobles. Any book retailer you can think of is going to be there. Go get that copy. All right, Arlène, thank you so much. Continue the dope work, and we'll talk soon.
You too. Take good
All right.
care.
Thank you so much. All right, y'all. So we're about to end another episode of IDTALK4ED Educators Live. And as always, wish you all good morning, good afternoon, good night, wherever you are in the world. And we're going to do this again another time. Peace out, everybody.